The largest irrigated crop in the United States is not corn. It isn't soybeans or wheat or cotton. By area under irrigation, the biggest crop in the country is turf grass, an estimated 40 million acres of it, roughly 3 times the irrigated area of corn. Americans pour something in the region of 9 billion gallons of water a day onto residential landscaping, most of it lawn. Nobody eats any of it. That is not an accident, and it isn't a modern habit that drifted in unnoticed. The lawn was designed to be inedible. That was the entire point of it. It began as an aristocratic display in England, a deliberate statement that you owned so much land and needed so little from it that you could afford to keep the ground in front of your house permanently unproductive. Every square foot of grass was a square foot not growing food. That was the message. Anyone could see it from the road. Then it got sold to ordinary people with quarter-acre plots. And now, in the American Southwest, cities are paying homeowners cash by the square foot to tear it out. And Nevada has passed a law making some of it illegal. So how did a 400-year-old status symbol end up as the default surface of an entire continent? And why is it being dismantled now? The lawn as we know it was, more than anything, the work of one man, and what he did to English estates was closer to demolition than gardening. Lancelot Brown, known universally as Capability Brown, because he had a habit of telling clients their grounds had great capability, worked on something over 170 estates in 18th century England. He is the single most influential landscape designer in the history of the country, and his signature move is the thing under discussion. Before Brown, the ground around a great house was busy, formal parterres, not gardens, terraces, orchards, and productive kitchen gardens, often close to the house because that's where the food came from and there was no reason to hide it. Brown swept all of it away. What he installed instead was grass, open, rolling, uninterrupted turf running right up to the walls of the house with clumps of trees and an artificial lake in the middle distance. And critically, this is the part that matters, the kitchen garden was moved, relocated out of sight, behind high walls, often several hundred yards away, so that nothing productive was visible from the principal rooms. The food was still being grown. It was simply no longer allowed to be seen. Understand what that grass cost to maintain in 1760. There were no mowers. It was cut by teams of men with scythes, working at dawn while the dew held, or grazed down by sheep that had to be kept off whenever the family was in residence. Keeping several hundred acres of grass short was a substantial and continuous labor expense. That was the point. The lawn was expensive, useless, and impossible to fake. Anyone can own land. Keeping land visibly, immaculately unproductive at continuous cost is a claim about wealth that cannot be counterfeited. It says, I do not need this ground. My food is grown somewhere you cannot see it, by people you will never meet. In 1899, the American economist Thorstein Veblen gave this behavior a name. In the theory of the leisure class, he described conspicuous consumption and conspicuous waste, spending whose purpose is to demonstrate that you can afford to spend it, and he discussed the lawn directly as an example. Then 2 inventions took the aristocratic display and made it available to everybody. The first was in 1830 in Stroud, Gloucestershire. An engineer named Edwin Budding was working in a textile mill where a machine with a cylinder of angled blades was used to shear the nap off cloth to give it a smooth finish. He realized the same mechanism, mounted on wheels, would cut grass. He patented the cylinder lawnmower, and one man with a machine replaced a crew with scythes. The second was the American suburb. In 1869, Frederick Law Olmsted laid out Riverside, Illinois, one of the first planned suburbs in the country. He required houses to be set back from the road, and he wanted the setback an open lawn, unfenced, flowing from property to property into a continuous green. A year later, a writer named Frank J. Scott published a guide to suburban home grounds that pushed this into moral territory. His position, put plainly, was that a smooth, open lawn was the essential feature of a home, and that fencing or hedging yourself off from your neighbors was a selfish act, not a preference, a duty. That is the moment the lawn stopped being a display of wealth and became a display of character. And once it was about character, refusing to have one meant something about you personally. Then came 1945, and the American suburb went from a style to a mass production industry. Levittown on Long Island began in 1947, thousands of near-identical houses built on an assembly line model, sold to returning veterans on favorable terms. It was, by the standards of the time, an astonishing achievement. Affordable homeownership at scale for people whose parents had rented. And it came with rules. The Levitt covenants attached to those properties included lawn maintenance requirements. Grass had to be cut regularly through the growing season, and if you didn't do it, the company would send someone to do it and bill you. Fences were prohibited. The front lawn was not your private space to do with as you pleased. It was a shared visual asset, and you were its custodian. Multiply that across the entire post-war suburban build-out, and you get the landscape most of North America still lives in. Now picture what that meant to the people moving in. These were households that had come through the Depression and then a war. Many of their parents had grown food out of necessity. Many of them had grown food themselves in a victory garden 3 years earlier because the country asked them to. The lawn was the visible, unmistakable signal that they didn't have to anymore. A green, weed-free, uninterrupted front lawn said, "Nobody in this house needs to grow potatoes. We buy our food. We have arrived." It was the same message Capability Brown was sending in 1760, scaled down to 60 feet of frontage and sold to 20 million households. And an entire industry stood ready to supply it. Here's what makes the post-war lawn different from the aristocratic one, and it's the part almost nobody knows. Until about 1945, a perfect weed-free lawn was essentially impossible. You could keep grass short. You could not keep everything else out of it because there was no way to kill a broadleaf plant without killing the grass around it. Two things changed that, and both came directly out of the war. The first was nitrogen. Munitions production required nitrates at colossal scale, and the industrial capacity built to supply explosives converted after 1945 to producing ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Cheap, abundant nitrogen arrived on the civilian market in quantities that had never existed before, and grass responds to nitrogen more dramatically than almost any other plant. Feed a lawn and it goes deep green and grows hard. The second was 2-4-D, released commercially in 1945 after wartime development. It's a selective herbicide. It kills broadleaf plants and leaves grasses standing. That is the specific technology that made the modern lawn possible. For the first time in history, an ordinary homeowner could produce a monoculture of a single plant family across their entire front yard by spraying it. And here's the detail that tells you everything about how the standard was set. Before 2.4-D, Clover was a standard, deliberate component of lawn seed mixtures. It was sold that way. It was considered desirable. It stays green in drought. It tolerates poor soil. And being a legume, it fixes its own nitrogen, which fertilizes the grass growing alongside it. A clover lawn is largely self-feeding. Clover is a broadleaf plant. 2.4-D kills it. So the industry had a choice. Acknowledge that its new flagship product destroyed a valued lawn component, or redefine the component as a problem. Clover was reclassified as a weed. Within a couple of decades, a plant that had been sold as a premium seed mix ingredient was being marketed as an infestation, and the same companies sold you the nitrogen fertilizer to replace the nitrogen the clover had been providing free. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's a straightforward marketing decision, made in the open, and the redefinition stuck so completely that most people today genuinely believe clover in a lawn indicates neglect. Stack it all up, and you have a system that feeds itself. The mower and the American market bought them by the tens of millions. The fertilizer, needed annually because the nitrogen fixer was removed. The herbicide, needed because fertilized turf grown as a monoculture is fragile. The irrigation, because cool season grass species were being grown in climates they are entirely unsuited to. The seed and sod to repair what fails. Every one of those products exists because of the standard, and the standard exists because those products made it achievable. The lawn is the most successful product ecosystem in the history of domestic life, and its core proposition is that you should spend money and labor every week to maintain a surface that produces nothing. Set aside the philosophy. What does it cost? Water. Landscape irrigation accounts for a very large share of residential water use in the United States, commonly estimated at around a third nationally, and far more in dry western states, where it can exceed half of household consumption in summer. The EPA's own figure for outdoor residential use runs to roughly 9 billion gallons a day. A substantial fraction of that is wasted outright through overwatering, runoff, and midday evaporation. The reason this is so severe is the plant choice. Kentucky bluegrass and similar cool season species evolved in cool, humid European climates. Grown in Phoenix or Las Vegas, they require continuous irrigation for the whole summer simply to stay alive. Nutrients. Lawns are fertilized at rates per acre that are, in some cases, comparable to farmland, but applied by people who don't soil test, onto ground that's often already saturated, immediately before rain. What isn't taken up runs off into storm drains and then into rivers, where nitrogen and phosphorus drive algal blooms and the oxygen-depleted dead zones that follow. Not a moral point, just an accurate description. No flowers means no nectar, no host plants means no larvae. No larvae means no birds, since the overwhelming majority of songbirds feed insects to their young. And your time. This is the one nobody counts. Mowing weekly for 6 to 8 months a year, edging, feeding, spraying, watering. Across a season, it adds up to a serious number of hours spent producing nothing, on ground that could produce something. Which is what makes the current reversal so interesting. It's not being driven by aesthetics or ideology. It's being driven by water accountants. So why is it changing now? Not because anybody won an argument about beauty, because the Colorado River ran short. Southern Nevada has been paying homeowners to remove turf since 2003. through a rebate program that pays cash per square foot for grass, replaced with water-efficient landscaping. It has removed a very large area of turf and saved a great deal of water, and it worked because it was voluntary and it paid. Then in 2021, Nevada went further and passed a law requiring the removal of what it called non-functional turf across southern Nevada by 2027. Grass in street medians, along road frontages, around commercial buildings, and in office parks. Not people's backyards. Grass that nobody walks on, watered purely to be looked at. It was the first law of its kind in the country. California has since moved in the same direction, restricting the use of drinking water to irrigate non-functional turf on commercial and institutional properties. That phrase, non-functional turf, is the whole answer beat, and I want to sit on it. It concedes that some lawn is functional. A patch where children play, where a dog runs, and where you sit in summer is doing a job. That's a real use, and nobody is legislating against it. What's being removed is the part that was never for using. The part that exists to be looked at from the road. The strip along the frontage, the green apron around the office park, the median, which is, precisely and exactly, the original aristocratic lawn. Ground kept deliberately unproductive as a visual statement, surviving into a century that has started metering the water. There's no villain here. Nobody imposed the lawn by force. It was a status signal that outlived the status system that gave it meaning, propped up by an industry with a great deal to sell and encoded into millions of deed covenants and HOA rules by people who genuinely believed a neat green frontage was what a decent neighborhood looked like. It survived this long because nobody was counting what it cost. Now somebody is. If you want some of that ground back, here's how to do it without creating a mess. Check for money first. Many water districts across the western U.S., and a growing number elsewhere, pay rebates per square foot for turf removal. Some require pre-approval before you touch anything, and doing the work first disqualifies you. Search your water utility's name plus turf rebate before you start. People leave real money on the table here. Then check your rules, and check whether the rules are still legal. HOA covenants and municipal ordinances vary enormously, but note that the law has been shifting in favor of homeowners. A number of states have passed legislation limiting HOA power to prohibit water-efficient landscaping, and Florida passed a law in 2019 preventing local governments from banning residential vegetable gardens after a couple in Miami. Shores were ordered to destroy a 17-year-old front yard garden. If somebody tells you it's forbidden, verify that against current state law rather than taking their word. Kill the turf without digging or spraying. Sheet mulching is the simplest method. Mow the grass as short as you can. Lay cardboard over it. Tape and staples removed, edges overlapped by at least 6 inches so nothing finds a gap. Soak it thoroughly, then cover with several inches of compost and mulch. Left through a season, it kills the grass and compost it in place, and you plant into the top layer. Start with the strip nobody uses, the frontage, the hell strip between sidewalk and curb, the awkward side yard. These are the highest cost, lowest value areas on full sun, hard to water evenly. Nobody sets foot on them, and converting them changes your water bill more than any other part of the yard. Keep the part you use. If you have children or a dog, keep a play area. Just shrink it to what actually gets used and stop treating the rest as obligatory. And if you want to keep a lawn, make it a better one. Overseed with white clover. It fixes its own nitrogen, stays green in drought, and needs no feeding. Mow higher. Taller grass shades its own roots, holds moisture, and outcompetes weeds without chemicals. Water deeply and infrequently rather than briefly and often, which trains roots downward. Leave the clippings, which returns a meaningful share of the nitrogen straight back. A clover and grass lawn mown high is close to what a lawn was before 1945, and it's better in almost every respect than what replaced it. 3 things, because this topic attracts a lot of bad advice. Do not replace grass with gravel or artificial turf and call it an improvement. Gravel and plastic turf absorb heat and radiate it. In hot climates, the surface temperature of artificial turf can become genuinely dangerous, and it makes the area around your house hotter rather than cooler. Living grass at least transpires and cools. If you're removing turf, replace it with plants, not with a hard surface. Some rebate programs specifically exclude gravel-only conversions for exactly this reason. A converted yard is not zero maintenance in year 1. This is the failure case, and it's the most common one by a distance. Somebody watches a video like this in June, gets fired up, kills the entire front lawn, and then doesn't plant it, because the plants cost more than expected, or it got hot, or the enthusiasm ran out. What they now have is bare ground and full sun, which is the ideal seedbed for every weed in the neighborhood. By August, it's a thistle patch. In September, the HOA letter arrives. In October, they lay sod back over the whole thing and tell everyone that native landscaping doesn't work. It wasn't the landscaping. They removed one ground cover and didn't install another. Bare soil doesn't stay bare. It just gets colonized by whatever arrives first. And what arrives first is never what you wanted. Do it in sections. Have the plants bought before you kill the grass. Mulch anything not yet planted. New plantings need regular water for the first year or two while they root in, and only become low water afterwards. And I'm not telling you a lawn is a moral failing. People like grass. It's pleasant to sit on and children play on it, and if you enjoy mowing, that's a completely legitimate way to spend a Saturday. The argument here isn't that lawns are bad. It's that the default is enormous, unexamined, and inherited from a status contest that ended a long time ago, and that the portion of it you never actually set foot on is worth reconsidering. Capability. Brown's real innovation wasn't the grass. It was moving the kitchen garden out of sight, hiding the productive part of the estate behind a wall several hundred yards away, so that what the house looked out on was ground that had been deliberately excused from work. Everything that followed is a copy of that gesture, scaled down and sold, first to the Victorian middle class, then to 20 million suburban households who had grown their own food during the war and were being told, very effectively, that they had graduated. The strange part is that it worked so well the original meaning disappeared entirely. Almost nobody mowing a lawn this weekend thinks they're making a statement about not needing to grow food. They're doing it because it's what you do. Which is the most successful kind of idea there is. The kind that stops looking like an idea. You don't have to tear it all out, but it's worth knowing what it's for, and asking whether the part out front, the part nobody walks on, is really still saying something you want to say.